Hello everybody and welcome to Book Talks. My name's Mahauni and we're going to be talking about some of my favorite books today. How many of you like superhero stories? The stories where someone incredible just swoops in and saves the day. Now I like those stories too, but I also like another kind of superhero story. One where the kid is maybe just kind of a regular kid, nothing really special about them, but they're able to do something wonderful regardless. And those are the kind of stories we're going to talk about today. Our first one is The Serpentide by K.L. Fogg. Now, The Serpentide is about a young boy named Wesley, and Wesley hates his life. Even though his mother, Imogen Vandergrift, is a billionaire, and he lives in a gigantic mansion, and he has more toys and games and stuff than he even wants, he's miserable. All of the kids at school hate him. And his mother will never let him do anything fun because he might have an allergy attack. And he's not even allowed to have a pet. He is miserable. If it weren't for his best friend Amanda, his life might just be unbearable. With Amanda's help, he's able to sneak around behind his mother's back and have a little bit of fun, like riding bikes and playing in the mud, catching frogs, and he's even able to sneak a giant snake into his house. Now, his favorite thing to do behind his mother's back is watch The Snake Stalker with world-famous Jack Mackey. On The Snake Stalker, Jack goes in jungles and forests, and he tracks down deadly venomous snakes and giant crocodiles and other dangerous creatures and shows them to the world. And it's Wesley's dream to do the same and follow in Jack's footsteps. But he's never going to have a chance if Imogen has anything to do with it. But then one day, Wesley uncovers a secret about his past, something that Imogen has kept from him for his entire life. It's going to take all of Wesley's sneaking abilities to uncover the truth and maybe even make his dreams come true. Find out what happens when you read The Serpentide by K.L. Fogg. Now, another great book with a young person doing amazing things is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. Now, Samuel J. Westing was the richest man in town. He never smoked, he never drank, he never gambled, but he was very, very patriotic. In fact, he played Uncle Sam in the 4th of July celebration so often, people just started calling him Uncle Sam. But now someone's murdered him. Now, Turtle Wexler is one of Uncle Sam's heirs, and she could inherit a fortune if she can figure out who murdered him and win the Westing game. The only other problem is there are 15 other heirs. They include Turtle's parents and her perfect sister Angela and her fiance. There's the Who's who own the Chinese restaurant. And there's even other kids who are heirs like Doug and Chris and Theo. Now, all of these people are trying to win the Westing game and find the murderer. The problem is somebody doesn't want them to find the murderer. And when bombs start going off and people start ending up in the hospital, Turtle realizes just how high the stakes of this game really are. Find out what happens in The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. Some of us like fantasy books. This is a great fantasy book if you are one of those people. This is The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett. Now, Tiffany Aching is a young girl that starts a nightmare journey between the world of fairies and the real worlds. She has been given 1 egg's worth of magic education by the witch Miss Tick, and she's going to need all of it if she's going to rescue her sticky and irritating brother from the dreadful fairy queen. Now, she is armed only with a frying pan as a weapon, so she's going to have to rely on her wits and the help of a group of tiny little blue men called the We Free Men to defeat the queen. The We Free Men hate the fairy queen more than anything in this world, so they're happy to help Tiffany. After all, she did accidentally become their leader. Now, as Tiffany goes into the land of fairy, she's going to rely on these wee free men to defeat the ugly bumblebee women and the awful grim hounds and the horrible drones, and maybe even save her brother in the process. Find out what happens in Terry Pratchett's The Wee Free Men. Another fantasy book that I really, really love is called The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Have you ever wished that you could walk through walls or just poof, vanish into thin air? Well, nobody can do that. Nobody Owens, that is. When nobody was a baby, he was adopted by the ghosts in the graveyard near his home. And because he was adopted by them, he's been granted special powers. He can walk through walls, and he can vanish into thin air. He can see in the dark, and he can even talk to and see all of the ghosts of the graveyard. Now, all of these special skills are going to be really, really necessary as nobody starts to look into his past and try and uncover the mystery of who he really is. So if you think you're ready for a super adventure with a spooky twist, be sure to pick up The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Another great book with a mystery to it is The Mysterious Benedict Society. Now, there's something wrong with the world. Everybody agrees on that. It is a crisis. And everybody knows it's a crisis because it's in the newspaper every single day. Rainy Boldoon knows it's in the newspaper every single day because he reads the newspaper every single day. You might think it's odd for a kid to read the newspaper, but Rainy is just a bit odd. Well, maybe unique is a better word for Rainy. He's the smartest kid at Stonetown Orphanage. He's really good at chess, and he's good at puzzles and figuring out patterns. One day, Rainy's recruited by the mysterious Mr. Benedict and taken into his society. And along with his 3 new friends, Sticky, Kate, and Constance, he's asked to fix the crisis and solve the problem. Now, if Rainy can't do this, the world is doomed. Find out what happens to Rainy and his friends in The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. Now, finally, we're going to talk about one of my favorite books of all time. This book is called Hatchet by Gary Paulsen. The pilot had been talking. Just a moment ago, he'd been talking, complaining about the pain. And then the jolts had come. The jolts that had taken the pilot back had come. And now Brian sat. And there was a strange kind of silence in the thrumming roar of the plane's engines. A strange feeling of silence and being alone. Brian was stopped. Inside, he was stopped. He couldn't think past what he saw and what he felt. All was stopped. The very center of Brian was stopped and stricken with a white flash of terror, a horror so intense that his breathing and his thinking and even his heart nearly stopped. Seconds passed. Seconds that became all his life. And Brian began to know what he was seeing. He began to understand what he saw. And that was worse. So much worse that Brian wished he could freeze his brain again. He was sitting in a bush plane, 7,000 feet above the northern wilderness, with a pilot who had just suffered a massive heart attack and was dead. Brian was alone. And that is how Brian's adventure begins. Somehow, he manages to survive the plane crashing into a lake, and he makes it to shore. But his only resource, the only thing he has with him, is his hatchet that his mother gave him that was strapped to his belt. How is a 13-year-old boy supposed to survive in the Canadian wilds by himself with just a hatchet? Find out when you read the story by Gary Paulsen, Hatchet. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so glad, and I hope that you found a book that you'll enjoy reading. And I will see you next time. End note, all of the book talks were original except for The Wee Free Men and The Graveyard Book. The Wee Free Men was adapted from a book talk by Melissa Bowman, And The Graveyard Book was adapted from a book talk by Brittany Curie. Both of these can be found on nancykeene.com, and I will put a link in the description. Thank you very much.